The smuggler who was taking us to Tripoli is the one who sell us to Malaysia.
Libya, no escape from hell. ليبيا لا هروب من الجحيم. وثائقي صادم يعرض في 60 دقيقة حياة المهاجرين العالقين في مراكز الإيواء في ليبيا. قصص مرعبة وتخاذل من الاتحاد الأوروبي والأمم المتحدة تسردهم لنا في لقاء خاص مع 218 الصحفية وصانعة الأفلام سارة كريتا.
La plupart sont au moins de 18 ans avec des signes de brûlure, de violence.
My name is Sarah Kreta. I'm a filmmaker and a documentary journalist. I've been working quite extensively on issues that are related to human rights and crisis, human rights violation. I've been reporting on the ground condition of forced displacement in countries like Bangladesh, but also in North Africa and Middle East. I've been working extensively also on in Africa, in different countries like Cameroon, like Ivory Coast, or also more recently in Nigeria. And I've been trying to report as much as I could from the ground. I was able to visit Libya last time in March, and I hope to continue to report from Libya in the future. I think it's very important for journalists that are focusing on conflict and the impact on conflict on civilians to be able to report from the ground. That's why I think it's really important to be able to report from Libya. Unfortunately, the situation for journalists in Libya is not easy, both for journalists that are foreign journalists but also local journalists. They're facing a lot of bureaucratic challenges, and it's also a very violent country for journalists. It's important to mention that a lot of Libyan journalists have lost their life during the last conflict, and it's very important for the Libyan authority to ensure that journalists are able to report and are able to do their work.
The smuggler who was taking us to Tripoli is the one who sell us to Malaysia.
Fortunately, foreign journalists as well as local journalists in Libya are facing a lot of challenges. And myself, when I was on the ground in Libya, I faced a lot of difficulties while reporting there, especially with delays and authorizations, but also with access. In general, I think it's very difficult to report from Libya. A lot of my work, especially documenting human rights violation and issue of forced displacement, I really focus on personal stories, and I think it's really important also for the audience, to connect to these characters, both Libyan and refugees, that are included in my documentary. My documentary, Libya, No Escape from Hell, is a 60-minute documentary produced by Arte and Magneto, and is going to be broadcasted in all around Europe, mainly in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, and in many other countries in Europe. But I also think that it's important to bring Libyan voices to these audiences that are not used to understand and to see the situation that Libyans themselves are facing on the ground.
Every day you will be tortured. This life is difficult. A group of people, you can survive, but one person as two persons, they cannot.
Unfortunately, we have to recognize that through these years of conflict, a lot of armed groups have been exploiting the situation, but also criminal gangs, and migrants and refugees have been in the middle of this exploitation, mainly in detention center, where my work is trying to shed light on the situation in detention center. I believe it's important to look at the situation in detention center, and especially on the situation that the European Union is creating in bringing people back to Libya through this European Union policy. So we have to recognize that the European Union itself has some responsibility when it comes to the European policies that EU member states are planning and designing with the help of their Libyan counterpart. Both the European Union and the Libyan have some duties and responsibility when it comes to human rights, and especially when it comes to the respect of of the right to live for migrant and refugees that are held in detention center. The situation in detention center is extremely difficult. People have no access to light, no access to water, they have very limited food, and a lot of people also mention torture and other abusive treatment that they had to go through, including humiliation and forced labor.
The hacker all over. Be shattered.
This is where I was kidnapped for 4 months.
I also documented the cases of war crime that were committed against migrants and refugees, especially during the last war in Tajura. I think it's very important for the European Union to recognize that their policy have a direct impact on people's life and that they are trying to stop this wave of refugees and migrants to reach Europe, but ultimately they are bringing these people back to Libya where their human rights are not respected and where their life could be at risk. I think it's very important to recognize also that the role that the United Nations have been played, especially because the United Nations have been heavily financed by the European Union and other member states with the aim to improve the situation for migrants and refugees. The United Nations were also heavily involved in these programs that the European Union have funded, and especially I tried to follow up the situation of the Gathering and Departure Facility. That was a center that was heavily financed by the European Union to host refugees and migrants that they would be evacuated outside of Libya. And I found out that there was a huge corruption and there was a huge scandal relating to that program.
La plupart sont au moins de 18 ans, avec des signes de brûlure, de violence.
استقرار ليبيا إقليمياً ينعكس بشكل إيجابي ليس فقط على ليبيا ولكن على كل دول الجوار بما فيها أوروبا.
Ultimately, I think it's also important to recognize the role of the international community when it comes to Libya and to address what are the results of this cooperation, especially for the European Union and for and those member states that don't want migrants and they are asking Libya to do the dirty job.
المواساة والموازاة هذه ما بيهاش نبي فعل أرض الواقع واللي دار فعل أرض الواقع لا تراق. في هلبة تقصير حتى من الاتحاد الأوروبي في هلبة تقصير من الاتحاد الأوروبي.
Cycle of crimes including murder, extrajudiciary killing, rape, enslavement, abuses have been going on in Libya since many years, and all the parties involved in the conflict have been responsible to commit this huge human rights violation. The issue of impunity also should be addressed in terms of who are responsible of this crime and bring those perpetrators to justice. I think we should start to call things with their name and say that war crimes and crimes against humanity have been committed in Libya, especially when civilians were killed during the war and disappeared in mass graves that they were found, or during massive killing that happened in Tajura. And can we accuse the European Union also of these crimes? Can we say that also the European Union is responsible when designing this policy of bringing people back to Libya by providing support and training to the Coast Guard and also designating this area that is the Libyan Search and Rescue Zone that has been created in 2018 while Libya was in the middle of the civil war? The European authorities for many years have been trying to push the people that try to cross the sea back to Libya, and they knew that these migrants, women, children, were being brought back to a system of detention where they would be exploited, and sometimes also there would be a huge collusion between detention center and smugglers that would benefit from these migrant and refugees to push them back again at sea. I spoke with the migrant and refugees that have tried to cross the sea 6, 7, 8 times. So if we really want to stop this business, and if European Union says that they are supporting a war against smugglers, then we should see this smuggler being committed to brought to justice. And this is not actually happening today. EU documents are mentioning the human rights violations that are going on in detention center in Libya, and they are also mentioning that detention is becoming a profitable business, and the issue of detention also should be addressed. It's very important that we recognize that these crimes against humanity and this war crime have been going on in Libya for many years. It's urgent for the Libyan authority to address this, but also for the European Union if they want to continue this cooperation.
All my hope is to Europe.